Missile ever created was a Nike Ajax. And in 1955, a year after its development, it was deployed here. And so we have some artifacts here, such as this refueling stand. Because the Nike Ajax was liquid fueled. So we have the refueling stand here. You've got the boom over here. And a chemical pit. And the chemical pit was any fuel runoff would go down into a dry well. And it would be filtered through rocks and sand. Yeah, and then washed out a couple openings on the other end of the site and ended up in the lagoon. That's how the lagoon got polluted. But what it used for fuel was it used a mixture of red fuming nitrous oxide and JP4 jet fuel. So,
red fuming nitric acid.
Yeah, but having the lagoon contaminated, even after it was no longer contaminated, was strategic in nature. After the Kent State incident, the last thing they wanted was civilians getting shot at by a bunch of trigger-happy MPs that wished that they were over in Vietnam instead of here. Why, we have no idea. But anyways, by the lagoon being contaminated, that took out one of the weak links in the security. Because the roads were blocked off, you had military present up here on the plateau. The access up from the lagoon was the weak link, which is probably why they had the dog kennel over there also. This wrecker right here was not here. This was actually a donation to the park. And it's here because there's no other place to put it right now. Now, what I'd love to see in the future, but this just depends, is, did you guys see the blimp hanger on the way in here? The horse stable. That was actually a motor pool. And I think it would be nice if we could open up 2 of those stalls, put one of these in there, and maybe another vintage vehicle on static display. But it wasn't here. Your big mobile lifting device was right here. At least one GI on each corner, and you pushed it. Because the average age of the troops that were stationed here was about 19 or 20. So mix 19 to 20-year-olds with nuclear weapons and motorized vehicles. Kind of a bad combination, right? So that's why they had no motorized vehicles allowed. So where you guys are parked right now, other than during the setup phase of this site, no motor vehicles were ever allowed in here from 1955 on. So you guys are privileged. You're parking in a previously restricted area. The Nike Ajax is a bit smaller. This right here is a transport trailer. It's got the Fenn crate on top of it, but that's what they transport the Nike on its rail with. And then there is the Nike Hercules, which is quite a bit larger. And this is the transport trailer with this. Now note the nice shiny green finish. Oh yeah. Right. Okay. The color was kind of glossy. It was a dark olive color. That's how these things were issued. The people that painted this for us apparently didn't quite catch the concept, but this, what it's painted in now is actual epoxy paint. So all the rusting and the problems we've had before, we shouldn't have anymore.
Yeah, right.
So that's why it's a little off color. But this is what the bullet was was transported on. And in the past, we've taken it to car and airplane shows, and we've loaded up our bullet onto the trailer. It slides right off the end rail, right onto these rails, and then is locked into place. And we've taken it on the road, but the way we've taken it on the road is we've towed the trailer, the transporter, onto a lowboy trailer. And it was taken by semi. This has now been checked out due to some grant money that was given to us, to where this thing is completely restored. And if we want to take our missile on the road to local shows, antique shows and things, we just hook the Pendle up to a truck and we're straight legal. Everything's been repaired.
Let's get some looks going down the road.
Oh, going over the Golden Gate Bridge was great. Last time we went took the missile to Half Moon Bay, the CHP thought that it would be a real bit of fun to give us an escort. It's just, they knew what it was.
The news helicopters were covering it.
Actually, we got the best footage from the Golden Gate Transit Authority's bridge cams.
Yeah.
We got some great pictures.
I saw that on the net.
All right. Okay, so what you saw in the first building gets shipped, minus expense, in this container right here. And what's inside this container right here is a complete missile body. We've got a total of 17 of them, 6 of which are built. And so there's that one there. And we're about to go into the Warhead building. All right, so
Yeah, right.
in 1954, the Nike Ajax was designed and it was fitted here in 1955. The Nike Ajax, we talked about outside, it was liquid fueled, but it had a solid rocket booster. The thing was armed with 3 warheads. If you see the little yellow stripe here, there's a 12-pounder in the nose, 196-pounder in the middle, and a 123-pounder in the rear. Everything from this chunky ring back is the booster stage. You drop off after about a quarter of a mile, actually about a tenth of a mile, and this is what it looked like in flight. But all the warheads for this guy were blast fragmentation. So you had high explosive on the inside, which was the red area here, an inner skin and outer skin, and then you can see the little metal frags right here. The mentality was, flight's coming in, you fire this thing, you get forward and above the target, it detonates, you get outgassing, overpressure, and you get this giant field of metal debris that the planes have to fly through. And that makes for really, really crappy flying weather, okay? Yeah. So, that worked pretty good. It would fly at Mach 2.5, which was great. We could outrun the jets. Because prior to this, we were using 90 and 120 millimeter anti-aircraft cannons. Now, to give you an idea what that would be like is, say you're out on one of the bluffs. There used to be one right on the edge of the beach over there. You hear a jet coming. You run down the hill to the magazine, pop the big chunky lock on the door, pull the big heavy doors open, crack a case of ammo because you don't have time to carry the whole thing, grab a couple clips, run it up and slam it in the feed with the rollers, and you raise the gun and the jet's 5 counties away. You know? So these things, they could catch them on radar over the horizon, and then they could actually engage them by the time they got here. But it had a 25-mile range, and that was its setback. Is that now if our enemy is beyond the Farallons, we can track them, but we can't shoot at them until they're at the Farallons. That's a little too close. So, 2 years later, they came up with the Nike Hercules. Nike Hercules flies at Mach 3.65, leaves the ground at 25 Gs. I don't know if David went over this with you. Basically right now, how many Gs are we feeling? 1. We're at sea level. Yeah, okay. This thing here, had one ever been launched from this site, you would hear, first of all, you'd be standing way away because you'd hear an audible crack and then an air-shocking boom. When your eyes reopened, the bullet would already be about, 700 meters off the pad. The way this looks like is if it one launched from here, by the time it got to the altitude of the hill that the radar used to be on, it would be less than 1 second, it would have already broken the sound barrier. On its way up to Mach 3.65 at 120,000 feet, where it arcs over and looks for a target about 95 miles out, and goes and plays reach out and touch somewhere. If you notice, the two diameters didn't mate up in the other building. One was too small to fit on the other. And that's because this is the telemetry set, this is the brains of the missile, the forward body section. And this is the car I told you about, it'd be pushed up through the front door. The bigger section would be pushed through the back door after they put the engine in it. And now we need to figure out how to make those two pieces fit. So we have the warhead section. And let's see, young lady, can you give me a hand here? All right, see, because she looks like she had a good breakfast. Okay, well, what I want you to do is come down here and grab this with one hand, just one hand. Right there, yep. And pull real hard. Pull this 1,100-pound warhead section. Oh, wow. Very good job. You just pulled a half a ton. Wow. Everything was made balanced and counterbalanced.
Half a ton, 60 kilotons.
No, that's nominally here in the States, you had two yields for the W-31, 40 and a 20. We deployed one other yield overseas because we did the surface mode of a 2 kiloton. All these things were switchable. The 20 kiloton had a lower yield, but what we did was we went ahead and completely safety wired that over to 20 because the lower yield was pretty much worthless in any theater of operation. There was the bigger yield, which is the 2 or the 40. At depot level, we would, a RADCOM, the missile guys, would call up the depot. They would say, this is what we need. They'd get approval from the Defense Department, and then we would configure the warheads to what they needed. There was another one that was not used in the Nike program except for once, and that was an atomic demolition munition. It was a 10 kiloton yield, and for Operation Fishbowl down in 62, down in Johnson Island, they mated this little 10 KT, which was about the size of the Hiroshima bomb, into a Nike scan and shot it out. And where they were quite impressed with this, it was not a high altitude burst like it's called in the books, but no one had ever done it before, so they called it a high altitude burst. It was a lower altitude burst. They got to see the flash go off. They got to realize that there's not a mushroom cloud up in static air. When you've got the explosion going Mach 3.65, it was teardrop shaped with a nice big purple glow. And what they did find out about this smaller bomb was they found out just how far an EMP flux will go. You know, Johnson Island. Yeah, knocked out the power in Hawaii for 3 days. But the Army came clean with it about 3 years ago when Hawaii was going to, they wanted a gazillion dollars to redo their infrastructure, and they quoted so that the 62 event doesn't happen again, the Army goes, oh yeah, that was us. So,
Never mind.
it was just like the only launch that we had from this command was one of these guys, and it went, and I don't know if Dave told you their flight characteristics, which is they fly up and out and intercept. Well, this thing went from the Pacific site. The Army said they meant to do that. Well, okay, so that's one of the reasons why the Herc was so much nicer, because the Ajax had all sorts of issues. If it was the right thermal conditions and you gave the Ajax a dirty look, the thing would take off on you. I mean, it was an unstable platform having a liquid engine.
Oh, okay.
The accidents in New York and New Jersey that killed all those troops was the Ajax. The Herc never had anything like that. Nike Hercules was quite stable. What you see here, this is a mock-up of the 600-pound blast fragmentation warhead, which was the conventional warhead. So 600 pounds, what we're talking about, is the equivalent of 600 pounds of TNT. Now when we talk nuclear, a 20 kiloton device, or let's go big, the 40 kiloton device, is the equivalent of 40,000 tons of TNT. That's a big boom.
Yeah.
All right. And because San Francisco Bay was such a unique target for the Soviet Union, we had these 11 sites around here. Did David tell you about why San Francisco was an important target?
Did we build military equipment here, or?
I grew up here, that's what I thought. But, and I thought because all the bases we had.
Right.
But actually, what the tactic was, is to send one of the big boys. They had a 1 kiloton and they had a 5 kiloton bomb, megaton bombs, both available. Not only on aircraft, but also the SS-18 ICBM. And they could send one of these 1 megaton or higher bombs 5,000 meters above Alcatraz Island, detonate it, and it would instantaneously flash boil and vaporize all of that salt water. It's this big shallow basin. Well, that salt water, now that it's become vapor inside of this big nuclear explosion, all the iodine is now irradiated. And then our standard weather patterns is it would be carried south, then east, and then north, pretty much over the population centers. That's why San Francisco Bay was a target. Whereas Seattle, that has a bunch of stuff, in fact, this is one of the reasons they moved subland up to Seattle, was because if the Soviets hit that, the cloud would go up, go a little southward and then east, but would go right across the breadbasket of the nation. They wanted the breadbasket. They just didn't want us pesky people. So the whole trip is they were trying to get rid of the population. So that's why we were one of the major targets, was just the amount of damage it could do to the populace without damaging the grain and growth that's in the center of the nation. And that was the mentality behind that. So, we had these things here ringing around here. LA, the same thing. We had 11 sites around LA. We had sites around the Hanford plant, Chicago, about 255 sites nationwide. All these sites were closed 74 to 75, except for 2. Alaska and Florida stayed open until 1979. And so that was a pretty interesting time. Did anybody have any questions about the bullet here?
Did they keep the nuclear warheads to the end?
Yeah. In fact, when the sites were dismantled, the warheads were removed and then placed in their 409 cans, this big chunky thing here, and air evac out of here, which is how we do it standard now. But prior, when they first set up these sites, they did an old trick of hiding what they had for a load by putting in things like Safeway tractor trailers, Piggly Wiggly, all these other, you'd look and you'd say, oh yeah, it's Craftsman Auto Parts. It's like, no, it's, and if you didn't recognize the escort vehicles, you had no idea. There's certain branches of government agencies still do this kind of thing. Although when you you get up on them, it's easy to see because the semis are completely armored, and the glass is Panzer glass. It's bullet resistant. But the trailers are specially made now to where if anybody tries to breach them, everything goes away. So any idiot thinking that they can go and take possession of something sensitive, they should hang it up. But yeah, so as far as reliability of these things, you put them together, test them on those two machines right there, and then you stick it on the up. You bring it up to this the actual launch area. In the launch area, they have this high-tech way of installing the rocket sustainer motor to the booster motors, which was they would connect them up on the rail and then raise the erector. Boom, boom. Hey, it's ready. That simple, gravity. But once the bullet was up there, they were so reliable that in my time as a nuclear weapons specialist, I only had one bullet go down, and it was a non-warhead component. It just happened to live inside the warhead skin, so we had to come out and fix it.
How do they set the navigation and the target on the beast?
It's actually spoken to the entire time in flight.
Okay.
It's set to a predetermined location for a surface-to-surface burst, which this one was not capable of surface-to-surface. Surface-to-air, it's talked to the entire time in flight. And it's done with the radars out here. We can step out and get a little bit of sun out here. What a wonderful day, isn't it?
I ordered the weather.
Well, I've done that too in triplicate, and it still hasn't come in, you know.
That's the military.
All right, so on these sites, you had 5 pieces of radar. You had the low par, which is the one that's spinning. Now that's the one that actually seeks and finds your target. Then you have 3 of these wheel ones. One of them speaks to the missile the entire time in flight. The other one checks the attitude, the angle in which the enemy's coming in. And the other one will then check the elevation of the enemy. And so it was kind of like having triangular radar and then one talking to the missile. And then for the targets that were further out, if you see that big...
Can I interrupt you a second? You didn't tell them the bad news, right? That we're doing an experiment and one person's going to get on the missile.
Oh, no, the dummy warhead experiment.
Yeah.
I haven't had any of them fail yet.
They do the slim pickings maneuver.
Yeah.
Well, give them a question. Slant the question, please.
I'll use one of yours.
See, what's wrong with Al is they used to lock him in Al Capone's cage when he ran the Alcatraz, so he
I was out there for 8 years.
has a different perspective than the rest of us. They leave him there overnight.
You guys having a good time?
Yeah.
Where's Mr. Time?
Me, right here.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I sure appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Pleasure to meet you.
Likewise.
Thanks for having me out. I ordered the weather just for you.
Yeah.
And look who I brought in for you guys.
Very nice.
I mean, is this
Yeah, this is fantastic. Thanks very much.
Cool
This
guy.
is the best hooky day I've had in a long time.
Right on.
you know, and I don't mean to interrupt Clinton, but we're really trying to revive it. I was brought out from my other job to come out here and really revive this. So talk to your friends and people. Tell them to come out and visit. Our biggest problem is, my dear friends will tell you, is getting people out here. This is a part of history.
Yeah.
I mean,
This guy's given up, an hour on a ferry boat doing his paperwork to come out here.
I was an interpreter on Alcatraz where I got to talk to 5,000 people a day. Here I talk to 5, I'm doing well. And this is such an important part of history.
It really is.
So tell your friends, family, neighbors, anybody, to come out. It's just Al Jolson said You ain't seen nothing yet.
So you're the Ranger John of the Nike days?
I guess
Oh,
that's
Ranger
what
John,
we
John and I
lighten up.
worked together, I think.
He's a great guy.
So
Rock and roll
anyhow,
Ranger.
What a view, too. I mean,
John and I were all there.
you guys see the concrete pad up on the hill there that's unpainted?
So if I was off, he did it.
That's where the high par would
I did.
live. And that was a larger sweeping radar array that,
He has more hair than I do.
unless you were an actual technician working on it, all we saw was a big, huge golf ball up there. All right? But the high par generates a little bit too much energy, and so we don't have one down here. It takes up a lot of space. If we were to set one on static display here, maybe on a pedestal out there, but other than that, we'd have to actually set it off-site for people to see it. And I mean, they were that big. I mean, look up on that hill.
Yeah.
I mean, so, and that was the pad. So these were a few items that were used for actually tracking. It would talk to the missile the entire time of the flight. Surface to surface, it would still talk to the missile, but there was a terminus point, maybe 12,000 feet, where once it hits that point, it stops talking, but it doesn't self-detonate. It just knows it's already going to that prescribed location and detonating. And over in Europe, that was a big ticket because we had 18 armored divisions of the Soviet Union sitting at our doorstep. And we had a very important mission, and it was explained to us. We had to hold those guys back. Don't let them through. The missile guys had to hold back all of the damn aircraft. Don't let them through. And by that time we're all dead, replacements should be back there, be over there by the front stage. And they made it clear to us. They're like, yeah, okay, well, as long as you hold them until you guys are toast, by that time we should have replacements, replacements coming in.
Somebody, was there always someone that raised their hand like, how do we get out? You know, like,
it's like, oh, well.
Yeah.
or would everybody just knew?
Actually, I ran into some Spetsnaz that were assigned to a site that I was on. And we asked them, and they said, and I quote, and this is their NCOs down, their sergeants down. They said, well, what our idea was to expose our lieutenant to friendly to enemy fire. He says, and then we were just going to bail. and I asked him, well, why is that? And he said, well, we knew about the guys at Lakenheath. And I was like, well, that was the defense that they weren't supposed to know about. And they knew that if they got inside the site, we would then surround them. And if we couldn't hold them, that there was going to be a strike bomber coming in, an F-111. And it would just go into a 45-degree dive, pull up, release a bomb, and try to get the hell out of the blast wave. And it was a tactical, it wasn't a big bomb, but we'll just say it was enough to rototill the entire site and all surrounding buildings. I mean, it was about 375 kiloton.
Wow.
So that was
clears some
and these Soviet special forces knew that, and so they said, yeah, we figured we'd bring our, we'd go and call them out there, and kind of expose where our LT was. And they told them this stuff in a coffee shop about 6 miles away from where the site was. We ran into them after the wall came down.
Oh, wow.
And they were just, they wanted to come see the area that they were slated to hit.
Yeah.
And so, and then they met us, and we all sat around drinking coffee and talking. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like when we landed in Newfoundland, they wouldn't allow us in the terminal because there were 3 Aeroflot flights with Soviet troops there. And so we're out just baking in this airframe with no air generating.
Oh, man.
Finally, we say enough's enough, so they open up both the doors. Well, who here's been in Newfoundland?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's no trees up there. And there's no trees, not just because of the temperature, but because it's windy all the time. And so now they open the doors and now we're freezing.
Let me take this part and do the bands and then switch them.
Sounds cool.
Okay, this part here.
Yeah, so they wouldn't let us, but one of the things I said was, even back then, is I said, well, GIs aren't the ones that have trouble getting along. Because regardless of what nation you are from, you are the low of the low. And so the GIs have a common denominator. That's why when you hear stories about Christmas Eve out on the battlefields of troops getting together from opposite sides, it's because they are the wretched refuse of whatever country they're from, right?
They're doing the same,
right.
the same dirt.
Exactly. They're all the low of the low. Where you have problems is when you start getting into government.
Oh yeah.
Or your command cells, especially ones that are really gung-ho. But yeah, so that was an interesting eye-opener for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was stationed here in 2000. 1980, excuse me.
I was a freshman.
Well, I joined the Army, get out of California. This is the first place that I was sent. They give you what's called a dream sheet. The dream sheet is where you get to pick 2 overseas assignments and 1 stateside assignment of your choice. So I put Fort Devens, Massachusetts for the States. I put Korea and Germany. The Army in their infinite wisdom sends you to the exact opposite of whatever you ask for. I figured that out over time. And so I got here and I was at Presidio, 45 minutes from home. Then they sent me to Fort Baker, 30 minutes from home. And I was thinking, well, this is a real drag. I wanted to see the world. And now here I am back, 30 minutes from home, patrolling the same beach I grew up on, and then as a adolescent, I was partying on. All right, which was that beach right there. Before the Park Service got it, every Friday and Saturday night there was nothing but bonfires from one end to the other, which was really cool stuff. Then after being here, I didn't want to leave, and of course I got sent to Alabama.
Alabama?
Yep. Red Rock U, Redstone Arsenal.
Yes, Red Rock.
Yep. So I got my nuclear weapons training at Redstone Arsenal, and then I went back there in EOD.